Minnesota Original is made possible by the State Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
On this edition of Minnesota Original, 10,000 Things brings compelling theater to audiences who have limited access to the arts. Custom font maker Chank Diesel spells out what it means to be an alphabetician. And world-renowned jazz trio The Bad Plus performs at the Dakota Jazz Club. These artists and more now on Minnesota Original.
If he proves reckless and cruel and wild, my moral obligation's at its end, and it would seem in me a kind of mercy to re-imprison him. Not punishment, but justice.
10,000 Things brings theater to audiences who don't usually go. So we perform Shakespeare and Brecht and Greek tragedies, but we do it for audiences in prisons and homeless shelters, people who usually are seeing theater for the first time, many of whom live their lives at the same extremes as the characters in the plays we're doing. And I think we keep doing it because they make us better artists. We perform for the general public as well, and we have a very devoted following of people who have seen lots of theater, but they love coming to what we do because it's so immediate and intimate, and someone said it's kind of like mainlining theater.
My soul cries out for vengeance, but I see my victory must be my own surrender. I kneel and offer you my neck to tread upon.
It actually started when I was living in LA, and I wanted to do a Brecht play. The play is about a prostitute who gets a bag of gold from the gods, and it's about her struggles to kind of help out all her poor friends but stay financially solvent herself. And we thought, well, people without very much money would probably really appreciate this story, but it's very hard to get them to come into a theater. So we found a homeless shelter and we set up a little set we built on clothesline. You could just hang it on a clothesline. And about 30 people finally gathered around, and they were very skeptical. But once we started doing the play and they got that we weren't there to preach to them, we weren't being condescending, we weren't trying to tell them how to live their lives, we were just trying to tell the story as best we could, they opened up their hearts and they just started shouting things out, like advice to the characters, like, honey, watch out for him, he's bad news. And they were just so open and honest in their responses to the play. I'd never experienced that kind of exchange. I mean, they knew more about the world of the play than we did, for sure. But we had our skills as artists and to bring to them, and it was just this amazing exchange, and it kind of got me hooked.
I'd hoped to find a new, wise, prudent man triumphing over destiny and the stars. Instead, I find a brutal murderer.
I don't think I've ever seen Michelle actually angry, but if you want to get her agitated, call 10,000 Things social work theater, because it's not. I think that the impulse to want to bring theater to those audiences comes from a really honest place, and it doesn't have anything to do with noblesse oblige. What it has to do with is these people have had life experiences that are going to be really resonant with the characters in the play. And that makes the play more important and deeper for the audience, and that in turn makes the play deeper and more important for the actors. And what happens to the play in between is that the play breathes in a way that it might not have breathed for 400 years.
I do not want your love or your embraces. You are a cruel father. You've kept me away from you and reared me like a beast. You have denied my human dignity, so I feel nothing for you, Father, nothing.
Is that the thanks I get for making a poor prisoner a prince?
What have you given me that was not mine?
I think theater thrives with very little stuff. I mean, we're called 10,000 things, but we actually use very few. We have very little in terms of set or props, and I think audiences love being asked to fill in the empty spaces with their imagination.
You are not a horse! You're a hippogriff! Why have you thrown me?
One of the things I love is that we don't have lights. You can't, we just have the fluorescent lights in the room. There's no dark house. The actors can see the audience, which they never get to do. And the audience, of course, can see the actors, and then the audience can also watch each other during the show, and it takes away a lot of barriers, and it ups the intensity of what's happening. And I think theater is wonderful that way. Well, since we don't have set, lights, costumes, much props, you've got to have great actors. And you have to have actors that know how to plummet the depths of a script.
Actors who work at the Guthrie, who work at the Children's Theater, who work out of town, will choose to work for 10,000 Things. And they'll choose to work for 10,000 Things because the quality of the product is so consistently high.
You don't have all the support from, say, sound reinforcement and beautiful sets, and so it really challenges you as far as your craft to go deeper.
Right now, we're actually doing a classical drama called Life's a Dream. It's a 17th century Spanish play by Calderón. It's a wonderful fairy tale about a prince who, when he's born, the stars predict that he's going to grow up to be a monster and a tyrant. So his father, the king, has him shut away, brought up in a dark tower, and it asks the question, what can you do if the stars or your parents or society has predicted you're going to grow up to be a failure? Is there anything you can do about that? And it's proved to be really resonant.
The road that the prince had went down, it kind of symbolizes the road that I went down and the road that I'm trying to change, actually.
Thought a lot about myself in a way. How he said he was untamed. They thought he was a lion, he was a beast. And a new output came on upon him.
Just the storyline. It makes me think like, okay, well, maybe I can change, because deep inside everybody is a king or a queen.
There was a janitor at a homeless shelter who said, "Thank you for treating us like we have brains in our heads," which I've always taken to heart. I mean, to me, it's fundamental to respect the intelligence of our audience members. We try to respect their intelligence, their imagination, and their life experience, and that's a very rare commodity in many people's lives. That's in some ways as valuable to them as food or shelter in certain moments. So when we get a sense that we've made a connection that way, there's nothing better. There really isn't.
Do I surprise you? Do not be amazed. Is it a wonder that a dream has taught me a little wisdom? I should fear to wake and find myself once more prisoner? And yet, even if that time never arrives, I believe now that all human lives are just like dreams. Remember, as you each pass on your way, our actors, our musician, and our play.
Getting ready to speed draw a font with Minnesota Original. Send. I got a Facebook next, okay? That was the Twitter. I'm drawing a historic reenactment font from the marquee of the Hollywood Theater on Johnson Street in Northeast Minneapolis. I'm trying to recreate those lighted three-dimensional letters, but in a playful way. I create fonts from scratch. Fonts are the typefaces that people type with every day on their computers, the words they read every day in print and on the internet, and those are all made by craftsmen. That's what I do. I'm referencing my source materials here. I took some pictures with my phone. Half the lights are burnt out. I'll try and get that into the font. The Y, all the lights are burnt out and it's all dark. I like that one best. And this particular one, I used the ruler to be the height of the letters, so that's going to be kind of uniform. That helps me keep it more uniform. But I'm also trying to kind of angle it a little bit to make it look like it's up on a marquee. It's a little more exciting. I'm inspired by all sorts of signage, handmade signage around town, that nowadays everything's made from a computer. And these things were crafted by hand. There weren't computers making them, there were people making them. They have a humanity to them that's missing from perfect typography of today. I heard somebody say it's not just a bunch of beautiful letters, it's a bunch of beautiful letters that work well together. This is what I've been doing since I was a little kid. I learned to draw the alphabet, kindergarten, I guess. I was always held after school in 6th grade because my handwriting was so bad because I'm a lefty. I think I found that was my favorite time of day was after school was out and I got to hang out and just practice my alphabets. A, B, B, C, C, D, D. Drawing those alphabets after school, practicing my handwriting. And so now when I do fonts like this, I like to pretend that this is my handwriting. Like this is how I would sign a check with a 3D font with broken lights in it, which is just silly because we don't write checks anymore. A lot of the artistic process is just watching something come into focus. For the artist, it always starts kind of blurry, or in this case it was blank. You start with a white piece of paper and just slowly, by adding and adding, it starts to come together. And it's nice because I work with the alphabet that I know where it begins and where it ends, that I've done it so many times that kind of know the rhythm of how many letters there are. H, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I like the holisticness of the alphabet, A through Z, it's fun, it's the alphabet, and it's always been there for us. Well, you start with the I. That determines the width of the stroke. You do the O, and that determines the shape of the circle, which is the bowls in all the letters. The B, the D, the P, the Q, all those things have circular shapes in them. And when you do the O, you determine whether that's an oval or a perfect circle. Or in this case, it's a square with round corners. The A kind of lets you know where the diagonals go in the font. I like the A through U, I know that much. And when you get to the V, W, X, Y, Z, that's when you start mixing in the diagonals and it's kind of like, so that changes the whole mathematics of it. I've done hundreds and hundreds of fonts and they're all just a little bit different. There's a lot of similarities between some of them. I can't help that because I'm doing the same thing over and over again. It's just the little things that make it different. I could try and make the most boring font in the world with nothing interesting about it, and it's just one little, the shape of the G or the bend of the S, it's gonna make it different from anybody else's font. But it's the way you render it that makes it unique and original and interesting. Original. There are lots of big companies all over the country and all over the world using my fonts. I just did some custom type for the cover of the new Target holiday catalog in the Mr. Frisky font that they use on Barbie doll packaging and the word James and James and the Giant Peach. I did custom fonts for Huggies, the diaper company, and Pizza Hut, the pizza company. I tend to call myself an alphabetician because I'm not just a type designer. I don't just make fonts, but I also draw the alphabet as fine art. I was trained as a fine artist. I went to school at McAllister College and I learned painting and printmaking and drawing and all those things, and that's what I went to school for. But my extracurricular activities were always publication design. So being an artist is just what I've always been. I've been a drawer and a painter and somebody who makes new images with his hands. Any work of art looks better if it's got a human figure in it looking back at you. The deal with the dude, he shows up in my drawings a lot. I put the dude, he's got a yellow face and big googly eyes, and I put him in there to add a human element to the drawings to draw people in. That's all we want as human beings, is to have somebody else looking back at us to see how great we are. When it's just the alphabet, it's kind of cold, and even if you use words, it's kind of, there's something missing. But when you put a person in the artwork and he's looking back at you, it just makes it so much more inviting. I number every piece of artwork that I make. I just kind of put it in the context of my career. Every piece of artwork I make turns out different. You know, even if I'm doing printing, I'm not a very good printer, so every print comes out a little bit different. So I just give each piece of art, every little drawing or painting or a font, you know, whatever I do that's artistic and creative, I give it a number. So 16,481. I like to have a name the font contest, get some input from my customers, see what they think for names. A lot of times they come up with names that are better than anything that I could come up with. There's probably another word that combines Hollywood and Minnesota in a way that is more clever. Look at all these neat letters. Look at how they come in. They look a lot less chaotic when they're on the computer, I think. So I can finally type out my word Hollywood. Good fonts for good people.
Paper cutting has a long traditional history throughout the globe, with Chinese paper cutting or papel picado in Mexico. I think the more that I cut paper, I start to see things through a negative space, that I can visualize the outline of it. I think a lot of my work is very quiet, and that maybe is in the choice of the colors of the white on white, or or a monochromatic quality to them. But also somebody might see them as busy. But I think that is overlapped with my choice of quiet colors, and also the softness of shadow that happens with them. So I think there's a lot of layers. There's a lot of questioning of these invisible layers and what's behind them. I'm working on a very small landscape. A lot of these smaller cuts are just these little microcosms of landscape. Themes in my work have varied. Oftentimes they're inspired by different readings that I've done, and just kind of thinking about them and trying to find a connection with the contemporary world, with perhaps a historical novel or connections of time. Themes have been focusing on food and engineered food system in the systems and understanding the connections behind it, to creating connections between nature and, say, something unlikely like Wall Street. I try to find uncomfortable similarities in things that you might think would be morally different. This piece is called The Underground Plot of the Royal Palmas Fritz, and it's one of my larger pieces. And it came from about a paragraph that I'd read from a Michael Pollan book when he was talking about the introduction of the potato to France, to Marie Antoinette, as you'll see her wig here, of which she began to wear the flowers of the potato plant in her hair. The plant was grown in the gardens of Versailles, and it was guarded by the French army. And the story goes that the potato populated France once the peasants broke into the garden and began to steal the plant and grow them on their own. My work is very detailed. What I hope with some of these larger pieces that you'll go in and experience them as a whole and get an immediate response and then be drawn in to really spend time with them. And that's the detail that's in them. And I really do enjoy making the detail of that because it becomes a very meditative process, and hopefully who's ever viewing them can have that same experience and get lost in the details. I think as an artist, my process lends to an exploration of just trying to figure things out. And I think that really is what art is about. It's questioning things and trying to understand them from multiple perspectives and grow. I enjoy these very intricate methods that I have, and to think about what it is I am doing. I don't always know, and hopefully I can grow and develop new perspectives by the time that I take to think about it and create something.
Minnesota Original is made possible by the State Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.